Welcome to another episode of the Quip Corners Book Corner. It's almost like I'm on a roll. My guest is also a first-time author. You'll see his bio in a bit, but please join us in the Quip Corners Book Corner to learn more about this unique book. You'll see what I mean when you join us. Welcome to the Quip Corners Book Corner, Rick.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yes, I'm delighted that, you agreed to come on because when we connected on Facebook and you talked a bit about your book, I was intrigued. I was like, huh? So please tell us, why you wrote your book and what it's about.
Okay, sure. Well, this is my book, Art, the Church's Response. I wrote it because a friend told me that I should write a book on art to Christians. And so, it was kind of, okay. I go to an art conference. And so I met him through the art conference.
Mhm.
He and his wife and I, as far as we know, were the only Christians that go to this art conference. And he makes printing presses. And one of the top printing press companies in the United States. And so as he began to tell me that I should do this, after I left the conference and I was going home, I began to think about it. Think, well, if I did do this, what would be in it? So
That's a good place to start.
yes. And then writing to Christians, then most Christians would ask, what does the Bible say about this? And so I began to think along those lines. And so I began to think, what is the biblical perspective on creativity and other art topics? And those are the things that I address in the book, is looking at what the Bible really kind of addresses.
Mm-hmm. Wow. That's interesting, because I was talking to another author and she was describing the process she went through in writing her book. And one of the things she said was something that God used to help her write her book or get to a place where she could write her book was art therapy.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So, that was my first time of hearing of art therapy.
Well, my background, as you're gathering, is art. That's what I went to school for. That's what I was interested from the time I was, young. And, I've read as much as I can find about it, about history,
Mm-hmm.
just because that's my interest. But in looking at what the Bible says, then I began to really try to make it understandable for a Christian.
Okay.
And so, you know, things like inspiration, imagination, the creative process, those are fundamental things for artists to try to understand. But Christians don't really know that much about it. And so, how does the Bible talk about that? That's what I began to try to make clear. And that was the hardest thing for me to write, is how to make these things clear
Yes.
to someone that doesn't know what I'm talking about.
I guess for some people like me, it might have been, he's speaking Greek.
Yeah. And really, for most Christians, that is true.
Oh, wow.
And really, if you think about it, we are made in God's image.
Yes.
I mean, we know that from Genesis.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that image is, God first revealed himself in Genesis 1 as You know, in the beginning, God created. He first reveals himself as a creator. That's the very first thing he shows us about himself. He's a creator. And if we are made in God's image, we are also a creator. That's part of the image that he put in us. We cannot help but be creative because that's part of who we are. And that will always come out in some form. No matter what we do, we have to create because that's part of the image God put in us. Now, what is it we create? That becomes something you know, you have to ask yourself, what is it that you're doing?
Yes.
The result of our creating our works. That's what the Bible terms it as.
Yeah.
We even term it in secular that, you know, this is our work. This is what we do. So we have that same language. And so, you know, our works are the result of the creative process.
Yes.
And so whether that's a product or a service, that's just what we do.
Wow. That is such a revealing way of, you know, helping, you know, us understand the Greek of art, shall I say.
Yeah, right.
Because to your point, yes, that's the first way God introduced himself to man, as the creator.
Yeah, exactly.
I never thought of it that way.
No, and it's right there in Genesis.
And not too far from the first.
No, the very first verse of the Bible, God revealed himself.
Wow.
And so we have that image in us.
Yes.
Now, you know, we also have an enemy who hates God. And he hates that image that God put in us. And he will do everything he can to destroy the works of God.
That's true.
And I think that if God, or if the enemy can't kill us, you know, at the beginning, because there's, you know, so much battle going on for babies. If that doesn't work, the next thing he will do is to make us believe that we are not creative. I think that is one of the major lies of the enemy, that we can't do it. We're not creative. You know, children, they're naturally creative. They always have to do something. They enjoy either drawing or painting or singing, doing make-believe, which is the start of theater.
Yes.
And so they always are in some creative mode. But as they progress through school, that begins to be beaten out of them. By the time they graduate high school, or if they're a little more stubborn by college, they'll tell you, you know, I can't do that.
Yes.
That creative image is always attacked in society, even by well-meaning parents. So that is just something that the enemy is good at, making us believe that we can't do that. We're not creative.
So, you know, I like that comment about sometimes even well-meaning parents, you know, are part of this dilution or diffusion or whatever, or disappearance of the creative streak in children. So would it be safe to assume that this is a good book for parents to read as well?
Oh, yes, of course. I would think so.
Okay.
Of course I'm going to say that.
Of course you should say that. I mean, because it's, you know, someone could say, oh, well, maybe it's just for church leaders, you know, who your target audience is, but it's nice to know that parents can also learn from reading your book.
Yeah, the intent of it is that we will cooperate I mean, we recognize what God is doing and we cooperate with the process. And I hope to find some of that. And
Yeah.
so that would be good for parents to, you know,
Yeah.
help guide their children in.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Are you able to read something from your book to us, please?
Oh, yes. So I'm going to read a section of the conclusion.
Okay.
To conclude the conclusion, let us recap a few highlights. From the time we are born, everyone shows God's creative character. Our creativity flows out of who we are. It is not what we do. I want to emphasize it is a manifestation of God's image that permeates and flows out of our innermost being. The Bible does not condemn creative undertakings and its ensuing works, i.e., art, unless we turn it into our source. Christian condemnation of the arts stems from a sacred and secular mindset, where a biblical judgment of idolatry is misinterpreted for an overall disapproval towards the arts.
Hmm.
Christians seeking to regulate contamination are not sharing God's love. Remember, we have a ministry of reconciliation, first with ourselves and then with others. Check if a work conveys significance in life. If not, are the works cliche, trivial, sterile? The beauty and depth of God's life is not a cliche, but relevant to our whole being and place in the world. Therefore, ask yourself, do the works we prefer reflect the substance and deepness of God's life? Or do we choose for ourselves echoes of society's superficiality? Test works. Examine how an expression relays its content. Recall that testing does not judge a content's morality. Moral stances shut down conversations with artists because our judgments condemn them and their creative action. Judging blocks people's reconciliation to God. We have believed society's indoctrination. Creativity and its expression are unimportant. But moral stances about the arts minimize the works and its makers. Creative people persevere through the public's misunderstanding, wrong judgment, and hostile attitudes towards them and their works. So if you want a proper conversation, discuss the way a work's content is expressed. And did the maker fully express the idea? When a maker has this type of conversation, they may open up and share their intentions for the work, even if they did not pull it off. Here we begin the ministry of reconciliation. So keep in mind Jesus' words. You are the salt of the earth, but if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden, which is from Matthew 5:13 and 14. So you are salt, you are light. You will affect people because you are there, even without speaking. And when you communicate, remember, you are God's representative, ambassador of his agape, his life. So go and share God's life, even through your works.
Nice, nice. That's a good one. That's a good one. So where can people get copies of your book?
It's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and any other platform.
Okay. So, when people ask me, where can people get copies of your book? I say, wherever good books are sold.
Okay. Well, that's true.
Okay. That's good to know. But thank you again for, doing what your friend said you should and writing this book. I
Yeah.
truly appreciate it.
Well, that was just the way the Holy Spirit worked.
Yes, indeed, indeed. He places people around us to
Mhm.
help us, get to that destination, that,
Yeah,
the
that is
different
very true.
points. Yeah.
That's very
Nice,
true.
nice. Yeah. Thank you again for joining me in the Quip Corners Book Corner, Rick.
Well, thank you for having me. I've enjoyed our conversation.
Likewise, likewise. You take care.
Thank you.
Art, the church's response. You know how there are things you read and you just read them. It never really, 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 really occurred to me that the first way God introduced himself to us is as a creator. God's an artist. So we all have creative genes. I like the way, Rick spelt it out. So his book definitely is one to consider getting. And you may remember my conversation with Robin and art therapy. So it's all part and parcel of God's plan for us to be creative. Below this, you'll see information on how you can get copies of his book. And I look forward to joining you in the Quick Corner with Ada in future. You take care. God bless you. Bye now.